大家晚上好我叫朱旭东，Susan 朱是来自于新西兰的一位律师，很高兴我们今天晚上又来到这里和我们的敬德的平台和大家见面。今天呢，我们的访谈录当中呢，请到了一位大名鼎鼎的一位会讲中文的老外，也是我们这边大家非常熟悉的，叫 Simon Young。Simon Young 有一个中文名字叫杨锦红锦红，你给大家打个招呼。
大家好，很高兴认识你们。我叫杨锦宏，我的英文名字是 Simon Yang。我10年学了中文，但是我词汇还很少。我今晚要有点中文，有点英文。最重要的是我们可以交流。谢谢你，Susan。让我来。今晚
谢谢 Simon。那么大家现在也是刮目相那个就是我们大家也是应该是非常的惊奇，就是我们今天 Simon 给大家一开始就带来了我们的中文的问候。Simon 呢，很多在奥克兰的朋友对他是比较熟悉的那么经常在一些我们华人的活动当中，还有一些政府的一些活动当中，能够看到他的身影。他呢很明显对我们的中文还有我们的中华的文化是非常的感兴趣的。Simon 呢号称是最懂中国的新西兰人那么他帮助过很多家的新西兰的政府，还有呢当地的一些机构，包括美国还有巴西的一些国家呢他们的公司进行有关于中国市场的推广，协助建立与中国的商务的关系，这些方面也是对我们来讲也是刮目相看。那么呢，他甚至有人称他是比华人群体更精通微信的营销和使用的专家那么今天我们的节目呢，就是带领大家一起来认识一下这位中国通，还有他在学中文与中国做生意这个方面的一些心得。Simon，您作为土生土长的新西兰人是吗？您是出生在新西兰当地 ，You were born in New Zealand, and
是的。
what made you to start thinking about study Chinese?
嗯嗯嗯，我在差不多15年，呃，我开始看书，看很多书，在
嗯哼，
我要学习世界的未来是什么。有好多大 topics。
嗯哼，
一个 topic 是 technology，一个 topic 是
嗯哼，
AI，还有 China。嗯
嗯
呃如果你理解中国，你可以理解世界的未来。但是那时候我真的不知道 even a little bit
嗯哼，
about China。所以我开始看书。
嗯哼，
在2010年，我从中国有一个invitation。那时候，
嗯哼，
我的公司教商人怎么用 social media。那时候我们只 focus 西方的 Western
是
social
的，
media。但
嗯
是这个中国公司让我们来中国教怎么用。那时候微博、QQ，
嗯
那时
嗯
候还没有微信。
嗯
所以我有一个大机会去中国。但是不知道什么。所以我开始一个新浪微博。我开始
嗯
QQ。
嗯
我开始学习中文。我的老师帮助我开始我的微博。我第一个是在我的微博说我是 native English speaker。谁
嗯
要和我做朋友好多人
嗯，
想做朋友和 native English speaker。嗯，
是的，是的，我听起
我
来好像是
觉得
一个很 很熟悉的一
是的。
个故事，因为大家希望能够跟你一起练一练你的英文。那么从您的角度，你可能想和大家一起练习一下中文，是不是这样子？
有点奇怪，因为我的中文听力
嗯
不太好，因为我的学习大多在网上，在打
嗯
字，在看一下，嗯，等等。
嗯哼，
我觉
so
得，sorry，
yeah, please continue.
我觉得，呃，native English speakers，it's easy to try to learn Chinese，因为好多中国人想学习英文，但是他在中国没有机会见面一个老外，所以在网上很多机会language exchange，呃，
嗯哼
但是如果你害羞没有用，如果那时候我有点害羞，没有
嗯
用，需要 brave and
嗯嗯
curious，yeah。
嗯
然
嗯
后 that person to person approach
嗯
uh, it led into business.
嗯
那是那是 business people 需要学习这个
嗯
friendship first then business。
嗯
我
嗯
觉得新西兰、澳大利亚、美国的公司不明白，他们
嗯
就是 business first。Let's get down to
嗯
business and then we can
嗯
celebrate。和
嗯
中国文化不一样。
嗯。我感觉到你好像已经体会到了中国文化的这个精髓了。也就是说，我们中国文化呢，也是说大家是先认识、先交朋友，然后去做生意。那么您刚才听到呢是，那么在西方的国家，往往是大家是 get on with the business and then during the breaks we let's get to know each other afterwards. So that's very different to the Chinese way of starting the personal relationship and getting to know the person, and then build the foundation for future business dealings and businesses at work. So I understand you also part of a Red Circle network.
对呀，红
翻
船吗？
译过来叫红网，sorry，中文
红
翻译过来叫什么？
红人网。
Oh, all right.
嗯，
Yep, that's your background. Yeah. Can you
对。
tell us a bit more about the Red Circle Network, please?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Mm.
So Red Circle Network, the owner of the company is an Australian, well, a New Zealander living in Australia, a
Mm-hmm,
businessman. Red Circle is a business consultancy and a
mm-hmm,
technology company. The red stands for China.
mm,
中国的颜色是红色. The circle means everyone has something to say. Everyone has something to contribute. We think
mm,
of yamcha, the
mm-hmm,
Chinese
mm-hmm,
table.
mm,
It's a round table, and so that's where the circle comes from. Network means everyone can contribute
mm-hmm,
and receive
mm-hmm,
a value. 不好意
mm-hmm,
思，我用英文，但是
mm.
sometimes it's easier to say these things in English，但是你可
That's
以翻
fine.
译。
Yeah, yeah. So 我们可以说是，这个 Red Circle Network 是 a group of business people. 你
嗯，
刚才讲他的 owner 是一位澳大利亚，是新西兰人，但是现在生活在澳大利亚。然后呢，主要是做这种 consultancy，就是以顾问，还有呢，商业，sorry，这个 technology 这个方面，就是科技这个方面的顾问，是这样子吗？
对。
嗯
Yeah. So we help Western businesses to become China business ready.
嗯
It's management advisory. We're also a marketing agency. We do media and digital technology and training.
Okay.
培训。
What kind
Mm.
of a training are you covering to get the
So
business China ready, mainly around the Chinese culture and the way how to do business in China, or what is anything else?
we help them with culture, but also with technology. We bring those two things together.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, as every Chinese person knows, WeChat is where everything begins and ends.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Mm-hmm.
has WeChat, and so we help
Mm-hmm.
them understand how to use WeChat for business. We A lot of companies don't do that side. They often
Mm-hmm.
just do um, broadcasting, marketing using WeChat, but we actually teach them how to engage with their audience using WeChat.
Mm-hmm.
So key people. So we have a workshop called WeChat for Business,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps people to network
Mm-hmm.
into WeChat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's part of the training.
yeah. I'm just wondering when you work with a mainstream business and getting
Mm,
to know more about China and use the social media, for example, WeChat to bridge into the Chinese market.
mm.
Are you targeting the local Chinese market, for example, in New Zealand-based, Australian-based Chinese market, or the
Depends.
main Chinese market back in mainland China?
Yeah, it depends what they need. So, for example, we work closely with Starship Foundation, 新航基金会,
Mm-hmm.
新西兰的国民儿童医院.
Yeah.
他们大多 focus 在新西兰的华人. Their
Mm-hmm.
focus is just the New Zealand community mostly. We
Mm-hmm.
worked for a company that supplied brewing ingredients, and they were exclusively interested in export. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a business to business company with an audience in China. So it depends on
It
what the
depends.
audience,
Mm-hmm.
what the company
Yeah.
needs. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
We reach them
Sure.
wherever they are. But there's 50 million Chinese people outside of China. So that's a really
Mm-hmm.
important
Mm-hmm.
group for businesses to think of. And
Yeah.
as you can understand, with WeChat and with other social media platforms, the way of reaching Chinese people is different
Mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
almost anyone else you can think of.
Yeah. So another thing I think, like you said, curiosity is quite a interesting part of human nature. When you mention about the WeChat, I'm just
Mm,
wondering. So WeChat is one of the major way of getting into the Chinese market, and
mm,
once you provide the platform to the business of the local business, local New Zealand or Australian-based businesses. And do
mm.
you provide those communications, helping the businesses tailor their communications via WeChat, targeting the Chinese market as well? Or you
Mm.
just give them overall strategy and
Oh,
technologies support?
we help them every step of the way.
Uh-huh.
So the China Business Ready program starts with they know nothing about China, and we act as a marketing agency for them, and then
Mm-hmm.
it progresses through the
Mm-hmm.
training and through helping with recruiting. Um, it progresses through to they are self-sufficient, and they graduate from Red Circle
Mm-hmm.
Network,
Mm-hmm.
able to manage their own Chinese communication, Chinese marketing by
Mm-hmm.
themselves. That's a big long-term goal because it is quite different,
Mm-hmm.
but we enable them to use the technology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is remarkable, actually. In the end, do they also employ native Chinese speaker to help them to create the content of the WeChat marketing um,
Yeah, that
materials?
that often happens. Yeah. So depending on what they already have, so some companies
Mm-hmm.
already have a native Chinese speaker. For
Mm-hmm.
example, an export company, they probably have somebody in the sales function or some other role who is
Mm-hmm.
called upon to do translation, and
Mm-hmm.
the company doesn't know if that person understands marketing, strategy,
Mm-hmm.
technology, and the person
Mm-hmm.
themselves feels very burdened with this extra work that they have to do. So we help to
Mm-hmm.
smooth things out, create systems so that the company is getting what they really want. It's on strategy. It's
Mm-hmm.
correct for what the company
Mm-hmm.
needs, and that person can contribute just enough. They can actually do their
Mm-hmm.
job and not be a
Mm-hmm.
full-time translator or that sort of thing. So
Yes,
we
yes.
work with with translators, we work with
Mm-hmm.
technology providers, we project manage to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
the company's getting what they want and the product, the content is relevant to the Chinese audience. Yeah.
Okay. So when did the Red Circle Network established?
Established in 2017, and one of our first projects was working with the New Zealand government promoting the election that year to the
Yes.
Chinese community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that the ads you were featured in and speaking in Chinese
Yes.
and educate people how to vote, where to find the voting places, and etc. That was quite interesting. And also with your signature, the orange hat.
Yes. So yes, for the last 10 years, I was known as the red hat guy, but for that
Yeah.
campaign, we had to be orange because orange
Yep.
is
Yep.
neutral. There's no political party.
All right. Yes, that's right. Red circle, and like we said, red means China, China, and the Chinese culture.
Yes,
And
that's right.
in New Zealand, actually, red representing the Labour Party, the new government just won a
Absolutely.
majority. Victory in the history. So that's quite interesting. Another thing I would like to talk about in terms of Red Circle Network, still around this, is any way people who interested, either they are mainstream or Chinese, interested in getting to know
Yes.
more about the work, is any way they could find a Red Circle Network?
Absolutely. So there's two ways. One is to follow us on WeChat. So let me just share the screen, and you'll see 3 QR codes. Here we go. Can you still see that, Susan?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you've got in the middle, you've got Hongchuan Wang, 我们的微信公众号. That's also got links through to our website, www.redcirclenetwork.com.
Yeah.
Most of our content is in English because our main market is English-speaking companies reaching China. But we also help other Chinese companies in China or in New Zealand or in Australia to reach mainstream audiences as well. We're building a cultural bridge that goes both ways. Yes, so that's how to connect with Red Circle Network. The other QR codes that we've got here, on the left, we have Yang Din Hong, which is my personal WeChat official account. Most welcome to add that.
Yeah.
That has
you possibly have a lot of people on your WeChat as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, how many contacts do you have?
It comes to about 20,000 across New Zealand, across Australia, across America, and across mostly China, of course. It's very interesting seeing on the Pangyo Chan who knows who, who is connected to who.
That's right.
We have我们在新西兰有很怎么说 a very close community here in New Zealand. Would you say?
关系很密切的一些朋友圈吗？
密切. There we go. That's the word. Absolutely. Yeah.
And tell us more about the Starship. What's your work around the Starship Foundation? We all know Starship Hospital is the national children's hospital, and it has a beautiful building and number one top caring services at the hospital. And we all know Starship Foundation is part of the charity supporting Starship Hospital. So what's your role in that, and why they engage you? What's the purpose for your work with the Starship Foundation?
Xinghang Jijianhui, they approached us because many of the families that they help our Chinese families. They saw
Mhm.
the super diversity in Auckland. There are
Mm.
many Chinese families, and they thought to themselves, we're not reaching this audience. We're not communicating effectively with Chinese people. So they looked for who would be the best organization to help. They came up with Red Circle Network, and we've been
Mhm.
working with them this year to
Mhm.
help, first of all, to help their senior executives be set up on WeChat, so that they understand what, how Chinese people use WeChat, and we've also helped them to establish their 微信公众号, their WeChat official account, which
Mhm.
is the Mao on the right
Mhm.
hand side.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Starship has many fantastic stories to tell about the lives of children that are much better now because of the work of Starship, because of the donations of companies, organizations, and mostly just ordinary people like you and me
Mhm.
making donations. So Starship has asked us to help reach the Chinese community at all levels through
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
of all, through WeChat.
Mhm.
And to first of all, let people know about the work that Starship is doing, and then also
Mhm.
encourage people to contribute donations and also to
Mhm.
volunteer. There's
Mhm.
really great opportunities to volunteer through translation, through
Mhm.
design, through event management when we have more ability to plan because of COVID. But now that seems to mostly be behind us, there's going to be some events on in the future. So
Mhm.
there's lots of opportunities, especially for people who might be new to New Zealand. They want to meet
Mhm.
people, they want to practice their English, they want to have some work experience in New Zealand. The opportunities are great to volunteer
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yes. Volunteering is a great way to get to know this country and the people, improve language as well, English as well. I started
mm,
with voluntary work. I really appreciate those opportunities and those people I met through my voluntary work when I
wonderful.
just arrived back in 2000, almost 20 years ago.
Wow, a long time ago. And
So,
look where it's set you up very well. Yeah,
mm,
I'm always impressed by the generosity of Chinese people.
mhm,
I think as a Kiwi, as a local Kiwi,
mhm,
we're very satisfied. We have an easy quality of life compared to the rest of the world. I'm when I first started to learn Chinese and met people from China, I was gandong. I was touched by
mhm,
the hustle,
mhm,
the energy and the work ethic and the sense of purpose that people
mhm,
brought with them. Yeah, that
mm,
has inspired me. Part of the Chinese
yeah.
culture. Mm.
So back in the old days, when you grew up in New Zealand, it must be a very different place compared to now. Um,
Yes,
because we know the recent history of the immigration is basically it's only from mid 80s the immigration policy changed, and then we had a huge immigration coming in, and prior to that, the New Zealand is still less diverse. So, are you able to share your memory about the New Zealand when you grew up in?
是的。我的奥克兰，我小时候很白。
嗯
The Auckland I grew up in was very white.
嗯，白人
我
为主的，
在
嗯
我在奥克兰西区West Auckland，这个地方还有 very white. It's even now it's very
嗯
Caucasian，但是
嗯哼嗯哼
大奥克兰非常diverse。我去 Dominion Road
嗯
CBD
哼嗯
很有意思，现在很有意思。It's like traveling around the world by walking down the street.
嗯
But
哼
when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, it was a very monocultural place. My school had two Maoris and two Pacific Islanders, and the rest of us were Pākehā, white people. It wasn't until high school, the early 90s, that I experienced some diversity. As you said, the immigration policies changed. But even then, the influence from China was very small. High school, I had a Malaysian close friend. I met many Pacific Island people, but China was not on the radar, so to speak. So what has happened in the last 25 years is amazing. Yeah, it's really incredible. 我在开始学习中文2010年那时候我就在中区在 CBD 那时候我在 Lorne Street 就在看一下
Art Gallery 附近。
只有对 that's right 只有中国人、韩国人、日本人没有白人所以那时候很容易开始学习中文但是在 real life 见面很难因为有点 awkward to go up to a stranger and 说你好I really wanted to but that's where social media was very helpful because I would walk on the street and see dozens of probably Chinese people, but you never know. You never know is that person actually a Cantonese speaker, a Mandarin speaker, somebody Korean. So coming onto Weibo that time was very helpful to get started properly.
Okay. That's what you just said. In terms of your Chinese, your speaking Chinese is better than listening, and you have a good reading as well. So, is it because you studied Chinese through social media rather than face to face, isn't it? Okay, that's
right.
quite
Yeah,
interesting.
That's right.
Back in the older days in China, when our country were less open up, in China, the main way for Chinese people to study English was actually through radio. When they listen to the radio and then copy and listen and copy the English sentences broadcast in radio. So that's why people tend to have a more better listening skills rather than speaking and written language.
Right.
It's quite it shows the age has changed. Society has changed, and even the way how people study foreign language has changed.
对，继续很重要。Whether it's back then it was radio, now it's social. In the future, voice will be more important. 因为现在我的 Apple Watch 现在用英文，但是最近我用中文。Siri 你好。
Oh, right. That's wonderful. 好像我们稍微有一点 yes, yeah, you're back now.
Oh, good. Siri interrupted me.
Oh, right. Getting to I think what we are watching is it your right the Red Circle Network. Can you see
website.
On the screen? Yes, the
yes,
website.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting.
This is another way people can get in touch. You can see the sign in button here. You can become a member of our website. So it's redcirclenetwork.com. We have a community, China business community, and you can read posts by other people. You can write posts yourself, contribute to the conversation, build a bridge of value and collaboration and communication between our cultures. Yeah. And look for business opportunities, of course.
Yeah, as any regular network meetings or gatherings do you host?
We are virtual. It's I think what makes Red Circle Network different, we're like a chamber of commerce, but most chambers of commerce are focused on a location. So you have the New Zealand China Chamber of Commerce, you have all kinds of different ones. But yes, we will be doing events. We do events. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. I think that's broaden the business to business interactions, and when Chinese businesses would like to get to know more of Chinese focus to other businesses, particularly as in New Zealand and in Australia, that might be a really good platform for them to be on. Vice versa, the mainstream business try to get ready for China business, and then of course you will provide some consultation and help with their strategy and marketing and technology through those social media channels to get to their targeted market. Another thing is in terms of the trade relationship between New Zealand, Australia, and China. I think is getting quite exciting at the moment, particularly this week on the 15th of November. We know there's another major, major economic partnership has just signed up, the RCEP. 是区域全面经济伙伴关系协定，that was 刚刚是在11月15号签字的。那么他们这一个呢，就是 ISEC 呢，我们讲呢，它是总共有15个国家和地区，包括当然是东南亚的这一个，就是 ASEAN 他们的 members 主要是在东南亚这些地区。然后呢，同时呢，又包括了5个跨区域的国家，包括 Australia、China、Japan、South Korea and New Zealand. So that possibly will become a very significant part of the economic relationship and the trade development as well. So for New Zealand is also quite significant, including 7 of our top 10 trading partners take over half of New Zealand's total exports and provide more than half our direct foreign investment. So with that growing, ISEC is a project to add 186 billion to the world economy and increase New Zealand GDP by around 2.0 billion. What's your forecast for ISEC, and particularly around further economic trade development with China?
So I think it's early days. It's been signed after I think it's 8 years of development.
Yes,
but there's still all the ratifications to happen in each country. But it's exciting. It's very interesting who's not there. So the United States is not there, and India has chosen not to be there.
Not to be part of it.
Not to be part of it, yeah. So it's generally speaking, I don't think it's any different from the big flow of history towards the Asian century, which is a phrase that gets used in Australia a lot. I think that's good. I think that's positive. I think this continues what started in New Zealand in the 70s. In the 70s, New Zealand, Britain cut off New Zealand and said, sorry, we're part of Europe now. You do your own thing. And New Zealand had to look at the map and go, where are we? We're in Asia. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are part of the Asia Pacific region.
Absolutely, yeah. So what's interesting with RCEP is that ASEAN has thought of it. It's not a Chinese plan, but China's the biggest player in the whole plan. So China will have a lot of influence. But I think because other parties are involved, I think it will help countries like Australia and New Zealand and even Japan and Korea to have more trust in the whole process. So I think it's going to yield a lot of very good opportunities. It's going to mean more duck talking to duck instead of duck talking to chicken. People will have the same a common language of trade, language of processes to speak to. So it's kind of a new era, but at the same time, it's a continuation of this trend towards the rise of Asia. You know, that's nothing new. That's to be expected. But I think it's wise that New Zealand's part of it. It's great that Australia's part of it, because Australia has a kind of a rocky relationship with China at the moment.
That's right.
So I'm glad that they're not missing out on this. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just talking about the Australian currently in a very hard position to be in terms of the relationship between Australia and China. Of course, that's influenced by the hostile relationship between US and China and during the Trump era. And lucky now, I think the US election has hopefully settled, and US is able to move into a more stable type of foreign policy once the new government is settling in. And of course, we know New Zealand is the first ever developed Western country signed FTA agreement with China that offered New Zealand advantage, inroad into opening up one of the largest economy in China. That was back in 2008, and we enjoyed the booming of a trading relationship and growing between China and New Zealand. And Australia, of course, is larger economy compared to New Zealand, but however, the recent relationship has been in a challenging situation. So what's your prediction in terms of in the future, in light of ICEP and in light of the dust settling following the US election, and also what's the relationship? I think the future position Australia is going to be placed in between the Asia Pacific region and economic development between the Asia and particularly the one of the powerhouse China.
Yes. So let's start with the US. So Biden is a far more mature and sensible person than Trump in the way he communicates. But the United States still has a policy of containment, which is very strange. It's quite arrogant, and there's a saying that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And so European or European descended cultures have a history of taking over as much as we can, you know, making empires and winning, you know, kingdoms. China doesn't have that history. China has had the opportunity, had the greatest navy in the world for many years, but did not create a world empire. So America is projecting its own nature onto China and deciding that they want to contain China. Biden believes that just as much as Trump does, but he will be more sensible, and he will respect, I hope, he will show more respect in the way that he does it, just because he's more mature as a person, as a politician. But where America goes, generally Australia goes. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm optimistic about Australia because Glenn from Red Circle Network is helping coordinate a group of really heavy hitters, strong influences in the China-Australia business community to have a voice to government and lobby them to reconsider the way that they're going about things, because New Zealand's history with China shows that it is possible to have a different opinion, but to still be respectful. Often the diplomatic speech from New Zealand about China is very carefully worded. It says we have many differences, including our size. New Zealand is very small, China is very large. New Zealand is very young, China is very 5,000 years old, and differences in the way of doing politics. Somehow, through the years, New Zealand has been a little bit more independent and hasn't been as much of a follower of the United States.
That's right.
We've seen that through things like the nuclear-free policy. New Zealand stood against America from the 70s onwards. We are kind of the Switzerland of the South. So Switzerland is always independent, doesn't get involved in other countries' issues. New Zealand kind of has that reputation. However, New Zealand is still part of the Five Eyes, which is a spy organization that's shared with United States, Australia, and others. So we're not completely neutral, but we have an impression of being neutral. And I think because we're small, because New Zealand is small, it's always a little bit wiser in the way it deals with big countries. There's a saying that goes, if two elephants are fighting, no matter what happens, the grass is going to get trampled on. And sometimes in the world, New Zealand can feel like the grass. So we need to be just wise how we stand apart in the world.
Yeah, that's right. And just like you have already mentioned, 理解中国就理解了世界的未来. So what's your opinion in terms of the future of China and particularly the influence of China in the economic, global economic?
Yeah. When I started to learn Chinese, it was such an exciting time because China was more open and the world was more open to China. It's a sad time these last few years because of Huawei being shut out, and there's been a time of countries and cultures turning in on themselves. I hope that's changing. I hope that's turning again towards more openness. And even if the general feeling is closed, let those of us who have an open heart be open. Let's create a tribe and help build a bridge of value. That's why we're in business. We have a belief that the world would be a better place if we understood one another, if we reached out, if we learned how to communicate to one another. Business is a great way to do that because people may not do that because it's a good thing, but they may do that because it's good for them. So, being understanding is good for business. It's good for making money. So if people can be less political and more commercial and add to that commercial, cultural, then that would be really good.
And also when people getting to know each other, know about their culture and languages, they more intend to work together. And New Zealand, particularly Auckland, is a perfect place for that. We all know we have more than 200 different ethnicities and more than 160 languages being spoken in Auckland. Of how many people in here, but less than 3 million population in Auckland. and
Yeah.
we can do business, we can live together and respect each other's values, particularly in those critical moment. For example, what happened at the mosque, shooting at the mosque, and actually that tragedy bring all people together. We acknowledge
Together. Absolutely.
Togetherness and oneness, and our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has shown the world what the leadership is about, is to bring people together and share the common value, the humanity, and that's really shine through those tragedy, the terrible things happened in New Zealand. Same thing as COVID. Now New Zealand has been in one of the very, very lucky countries. We managed to contain the virus and living in our bigger bubble and keep our family safe and keep our society still in a relatively normality and have normal lives. And business, like you said, play a big part, and that sharing the common goal and sharing different cultures, languages, and respect relationships, as long as we can do business together. That's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing those insights with us, and Simon, and also being a great bridge between the Western country and the Eastern cultures altogether. And I understand you not only working for the government and, for example, the general election campaign you run for the society, and charity work you do for the Starship Hospital, and you also do businesses in overseas as well. Absolutely. And help them to get more understanding about the Chinese culture and reaching into the Chinese market, isn't it? Can you share some more about what you do outside of New Zealand as well?
Yeah, sure. So most of this year, we were involved with an organization in Hollywood, Los Angeles, that had a worldwide online education platform. And worldwide must include China. So we helped them with a lot of technology assistance to ensure that they could be hosted in China, viewed in China, and we worked with Alibaba Cloud on that. We created a bilingual website, WeChat official account, and started to, one thing that we also do is we help connect to the initial kind of group of potential customers. So we did a bit of that in WeChat groups as well. So that was one project that we did. That was the project began one way. It was they were planning on a real world event that people had to fly over to, and so we
fly
with
to
the team,
US or fly to China?
To the US. Fly to the US, yeah. So that was the plan at the beginning of 2020, and then around February, we were watching the news and going,
different
"Oh
world
my
now."
goodness, different world." Yeah. So we did what many businesses had to do and pivoted. So that was one project we did in the United States. I was based in Auckland. Glenn was based in Perth, Western Australia. So the virtual work is very powerful. You can work with clients from all around the world. We also helped a Brazilian financial technology company, eBanks, learn more about WeChat, how it was going to be used to promote their technology. So we were really privileged to not only be a bridge between English-speaking culture, but Portuguese-speaking culture into Chinese culture. Yeah. So you can see these projects.
I mean, interesting. Sorry, Simon. Yeah. So how you do that? You bring a totally different language, which you assumably not expert in, to Chinese market.
So that's where the training comes in. We build capability so that the
mm,
person, the organization that we're training, they had the
mm,
skills themselves. And thankfully, most of them spoke English. So
mhm,
there was a training session, and so we do it very much like this on Zoom with
mhm,
sharing screens on our mobile phone, preparing a lot to make sure that
mhm,
the people end up with the skills that they need to get their message across and get the response that they want through WeChat.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. How long
Um,
the training program normally takes?
We have a 90-minute workshop for WeChat for Business. We have
Mhm,
a year-long program called China Business Ready, which incorporates your regular training elements into it. So the
mhm,
year-long program is for companies that are really seriously committed to the China market and committed to having
mhm,
the capability themselves. Um, Yeah, and so that lasts for a
mhm,
year. It involves us doing a lot of the work, but then also meeting with them regularly to train them and take them through so that at the end of that process, they have the tools in their hands. It's really
mhm,
interesting seeing
mhm,
English-speaking people, for example, dealing with the
mhm,
WeChat
mhm,
back office. Um,
mhm,
it's actually quite, if you're in the right frame of mind, it's possible to use
mhm,
it with Google Translate, and um,
mhm.
we we show them the way and give them confidence because it can be very scary at
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people you train in terms of the mainstream businesses, are they the
Mm.
leaders or they are the people who are already working in the marketing
Yeah.
department?
For different sized companies, it's a different answer. So for most organizations, we will try to deal with the chief executive. For example, with Starship,
Mm-hmm,
the chief executive
mm-hmm,
has been part of the training. Not a huge
mm-hmm,
part because a lot of her communications are done by somebody
mm-hmm,
on her
mm-hmm.
behalf.
Yeah.
But still, it's really important that they understand why. Why is this
Mm-hmm,
happening? What is the value to their
mm-hmm,
organization?
mm-hmm,
Otherwise, if there's no value, we shouldn't be doing anything. But if there is value, we
mm-hmm,
should be doing our best and pushing ahead. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
We often then, after dealing with the top level, deal with the marketing people who are the people working at the
mm-hmm,
front line every day. Often very
mm-hmm,
busy people,
mm-hmm,
often very knowledgeable about Facebook, about Google, those kind of
yes.
things.
Mm-hmm,
But then, so this was the same journey that I went on back in 2010,
mm-hmm,
very
mm-hmm,
familiar with Facebook, Google, Twitter. And then
mm-hmm,
there comes China. Oh, none of those
mm-hmm,
things
mm,
work
mm, mm.
anymore.
Totally different,
There's
different
a whole
channels. Mm,
different world. I actually thought of it
mm,
like
mm,
landing in a different world. Uh,
mm-hmm,
everything's different. Yeah.
mm, mm.
And so you've got to find
So they
what works.
once your training and you set the strategies, and
Mm,
in terms of the ongoing communications in WeChat and in Chinese
mhm,
language, who's doing all
mm.
those work? Are you still playing a part on
Yeah.
ongoing support?
Absolutely, yeah. That's why we have the year-long program
Mm,
with China Business Ready, because it
mm-hmm,
doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot
mm-hmm,
to get used to. So yeah, we're playing a very active role with our clients. Um, Sometimes they will, if they're a charity, for example, they'll recruit a volunteer and work alongside the
mm-hmm,
volunteer. Other
mm-hmm.
times they will actually end up hiring a
Hiring.
full-time Chinese
Yeah.
speaking person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chinese speaking
yeah,
person. Yeah, which create more
mm,
jobs and more understanding about Chinese and
absolutely.
Chinese culture and Chinese market, which is overall a good thing for Auckland.
We always say China's not going away. And even for
Mm,
export companies or say
mhm,
education companies at the moment,
mhm, mhm,
yes, if you can't reach your audience in China, there's still 250,000 at least
mhm,
250,000 Chinese people in New Zealand who are
mhm,
also
mhm,
your market, your
mhm,
audience. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, we are cautious about time. Before we finish, I would like to share one of your pieces currently on
Sure.
YouTube with our audience. Just give me a second. I'm going to
Sure.
share these with everyone. Can you? This is Simon Young. This is the orange head which we have offered.
朋友们通常会在微信上怎么问我？你是哪里人？说我是新西兰人。哦，他们说你说什么语言呢？英语。有时候我需要讲一点历史知识来向他们解释为什么我的祖辈来自英国，而我却生活在地球的另一边。这也是我知道，作为一个新西兰人，重要的不是我们的种族、语言、文化，但是我们做些什么。What makes a New Zealander is not their ethnicity, the language, the culture, but what we do.
Here we go.
Wonderful. Great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. It was one of those things where the message was not that interesting. You must vote. You're a New Zealander, you must vote. But the approach we wanted to go with was what does it mean to be a New Zealander?
New Zealander, yeah.
Everyone who is here has come from somewhere else, but when you're here, you belong. If you have residency, if you're a citizen, you definitely belong. But a lot of Chinese people didn't feel that way, and so that was the beginning of a series where we interviewed local Chinese people and asked them exactly that question: what does it mean to be a Kiwi? And some people said, I don't feel like a Kiwi, and other people said, I really am a Kiwi. And we gave them space to have a voice, and then ended by saying, you can vote. You know, it's part of being a New Zealander.
Yeah, you decide what kind of a New Zealander you would like to be.
Exactly.
Particularly for the young generations. It's so important. It's wonderful. Yeah, Simon, thank you very much for being my guest and opening up with your experience while you study Chinese and your view about China and the trading relationship in Asia Pacific, and also what you do in terms of helping the businesses building more bridges, more connections with the Chinese market, either locally in New Zealand, in Australia, or back in the bigger market in China. And you actually bring a very interesting perspective. Chinese people who are born and raised in overseas and who speak Chinese, we feel, you know, we belong to here. And for example, for me, I feel I'm a person in between of two worlds. And I think at the moment, I found that confidence of switching my roles into different worlds, that at that moment, I could call this is my home. I feel I belong to here. And also I can contribute to this country with my language, my culture, and my skills trained in New Zealand because this
Very
is my
much.
country. I want to bring people together. I want to serve my people, no matter where you come from. So, and for you who were born in New Zealand and grow up in New Zealand and see a different future of New Zealand, and because of the multiculturalism and the diverse, the richness of the culture and talents, bring into New Zealand, make a New Zealand which is such wonderful place, and you bringing your own perspective, your skills and connectivities, and make this society a better place. And thank you so much, Simon, for this. And we're looking forward to catch up at different places. I'll see you speak Chinese with our Chinese community friends and relatives. You are part of our Chinese community, and thank you so much for being there.
感谢 Susan. Thank you for all that you do for our community. You're inspiring. Your story is inspiring, but also what you do every day is fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
晚上好，
大家
everyone.
晚上好。再见。
再见。